Autumn, 1281. The sky over Kyushu was bruised with storm clouds, and the sea, always restless, grew more violent with each passing day. But it was not weather that stirred fear in the hearts of the coastal villagers. It was sails. Hundreds of them. Black and foreign, stretching across the horizon like a curtain of fate. The Mongol invasion had come again. In the path of this second great fleet, scattered like stones before a tide, lay the small island of Tsukinowa. Barely marked on maps, it was known only for its fishing waters and a long-abandoned watchtower from the old wars. It had no fort, no port, no standing army. Just a few dozen huts, a scattering of rice fields, and a people who lived by the rhythm of tide and season. When the first warning fires flared on the distant mainland, most expected to be forgotten. They were not. 3 days later, a Mongol scout vessel landed on the northern beach. The villagers fled to the hills, but not before a child was taken. The island's headman, Harada Goro, a grizzled former Ashigaru, foot soldier, from the Genpei Wars, called for a council beneath the withered torii gate. "We are not warriors," one farmer protested. "No," Goro said. "But we are not dead yet either." Word was sent across the strait to the mainland. Help was promised, but days away. Goro knew the truth: by the time it came, Tsukinowa would be ash and smoke. So they prepared. Old spears were pulled from thatch roofs. Bamboo was sharpened into stakes. Nets were soaked in oil. The abandoned watchtower was repaired by hand and rope. From the hills, a pair of wayward samurai, disgraced brothers from Chikuzen, emerged to offer their blades. The younger, Yujiro, was reckless and proud. The elder, Kenzo, silent and grim. "We don't fight for reward," Kenzo said. "Only for what still has breath." A week passed. Then came fire. A Mongol detachment, 50 strong, armed with bows, steel, and foreign commands, landed on the southern cove. The defenders waited in the cane fields, hidden behind woven blinds. When the invaders advanced, the fields exploded into flame. Molotov firepots, crafted from sake jars, lit up the dawn. Yujiro led the first charge, screaming with a fury that cracked the morning stillness. Goro fought beside him, his old spear splintering against Mongol armor. It was chaos, bloody and brief. And then, silence. Half the enemy lay dead. The rest fled to their boats. Tsukinowa had held. For a day. But they all knew more would come. And this time, they would not come in 50. They would come in hundreds. In thousands. In the morning, as crows circled the scorched fields, Goro climbed the old tower. He looked out at the sea. More sails. The island would not be spared. So he whispered to the wind, "Then let them come." By the second sunrise, the island awoke to the thump of war drums across the water. 3 Mongol ships anchored in the bay. Larger vessels, painted with red dragons and crowned with archers. Their commanders didn't hide, they stood proudly on deck, pointing toward the shore. Goro gathered the defenders beneath the watchtower. Fewer than 60 stood ready, fishermen, farmers, 2 samurai, and a handful of youths still learning to hold a blade. Each carried a weapon of some kind. Most were improvised, sickles, clubs, sharpened oars. But every pair of eyes burned with purpose. "We won't outfight them," Goro said. "So we outlast them. We outthink them." Yujiro spat. "Or we die with steel in hand." Kenzo said nothing, merely adjusted his grip on a borrowed naginata. The villagers had turned the terrain into traps. Pits dug behind fences. Caltrops hidden under leaves. Bamboo spikes beneath shallow pools. The fields were now a minefield, and the village, once open, was now a warren of walls and choke points. The Mongols landed in force by midday. Over 100 men, armored and in formation, with shield walls and archers. They marched inland, organized, disciplined. Then the trap sprang. The first pit took 5 men. A wall collapsed beneath another squad, burying them in boiling ash Goro's men had prepared from old fire kilns. From the rooftops, villagers dropped oil and hurled stones. Kenzo moved like a ghost, severing limbs with calm precision. Yujiro fought like flame, reckless and bright. By dusk, the Mongols pulled back, but they left a burning trail behind them. Huts smoldered. Livestock scattered. One defender had fallen, old Nakamura, struck by an arrow while shielding his granddaughter. They buried him beneath the torii that night. The girl placed a rice ball beside his grave. Goro lit incense and spoke words of no faith, just respect. The next day, Mongol horns blew again. The siege had begun. They would not attack again immediately. They had learned respect for this stubborn patch of land. But they would encircle it, cut it off, starve it. And from the old tower, Goro watched the fires on the beach grow. They think we will break, he said to Kenzo. Kenzo looked east, toward the mainland. Then we must last until help comes. Goro didn't reply. He wasn't sure help would come at all. Days passed. Nights stretched longer. The villagers rationed dried fish, boiled roots, and drank from hidden wells. The siege had truly begun. The Mongols stayed just out of reach, forming camps in the hills and on the beaches, cutting off every path in or out. At night, they lit great bonfires and banged drums, not to attack, but to wear down the defenders. Sleep became rare. Children cried. Elders grew silent. The air was thick with smoke, fear, and the weight of waiting. Goro called a meeting beneath the tower, this time only of the able-bodied. We strike tonight. Not to win. But to remind them, we are still here. Kenzo agreed with a silent nod. Yujiro grinned like a fox with blood on its teeth. The others prepared. Under the cover of mist, 10 men crept from the village, hugging the edges of shadows. They carried bows, oil flasks, and cloth-wrapped fire arrows. Their target was a bamboo grove the Mongols had begun harvesting for wood. If it burned, the fire might spread to the main camp. Kenzo led the approach. Every footstep was measured, every breath timed. They reached the grove near midnight. 5 sentries sat dozing at a fire. One by one, arrows ended them. Then the fire arrows flew. The bamboo hissed, cracked, and erupted in flame. Green stalks exploded like cannon blasts. The inferno spread rapidly, licking across the ground, leaping tree to tree. Horses screamed. Mongols shouted in panic. Tents collapsed. The raiders vanished back into the trees before pursuit could begin. From the tower, Goro watched the blaze illuminate the night. "They'll answer this," he murmured. They did. At dawn, a Mongol commander approached under white flag. He spoke through a translator with cold calm. "Surrender the village. No more deaths. You will be spared." Goro said nothing. He only turned, pointed to the blackened horizon, and replied, "We are not the ones who burn. We are the fire." The commander left. And the siege turned crueler. From then on, the Mongols stopped calling for surrender. They began testing the walls by night. Flaming arrows. Scouting parties. Poisoned water. But still the island held. And Goro knew, they would need to hold for much longer still. The fields had become bone and soot. Crops trampled, soil scorched. But Goro saw opportunity in the ashes. He remembered a tactic from the Genpei War: ash trenches, low pits filled with powdered charcoal and sharp grit, laid in enemy paths. Step into one too quickly, and feet slip, eyes sting, and chaos follows. So the villagers dug. By night, they carved shallow furrows around the village perimeter, especially at the narrow southern trail leading uphill. Into them, they poured what little remained of the blackened kilns, then covered the pits with leaves. Yujiro laughed when he saw it. A wall made of dust. Let them run, Goro answered. And let them fall. 3 nights later, the Mongols attacked. This time, they came silent. No drums. No torches. Just shadows, moving like ink beneath the trees. But the defenders were waiting. Kenzo, from the tower, spotted movement. He signaled with a single bell. Archers readied. Then came the scream. A Mongol slipped in the ash pit, crashing into another. The front line tumbled, blinded, choking. That was the signal. Arrows flew. Screams broke the silence. Mongols retreated, only to run into more traps. Bamboo stakes pierced through sandals. Firewalls lit from behind sentries turned the slope into an oven. By sunrise, the southern trail was littered with broken armor and blood. No defenders lost. For once. But not all was victory. In the stillness that followed, Goro found a hidden banner planted near the far ridge. A marker, left quietly in the dark. On it, the Mongol script read, "We know your wells." A message. A threat. That evening, a girl collapsed beside a well. Her lips were black. Poison. The villagers sealed the water. They rationed what little rain remained in clay jars, hidden deep in the root cellars. Kenzo, for the first time, showed doubt. They are watching us too closely. Yujiro, furious, slammed his fist against the tower's rail. We should charge. End this. Goro held his gaze on the sea. They want us to panic. So we will not. He turned to Kenzo. Tomorrow night, we strike again. But not with fire. This time, we take something back. What? One of theirs. That night, clouds cloaked the moon. The air was heavy with mist, the kind that softened sound and blurred shapes. It was the perfect night for shadows. Kenzo chose 4 men, silent hunters, nimble and steady. Among them, the youngest was Ichiro, no more than 16, but sharp-eyed and quicker than any grown man. Each man carried a tanto, dagger, rope, and padded sandals. No metal. No talk. They crept along a ridge above the eastern Mongol camp, where scouts often lit signal fires. A single sentry paced along a narrow path lined with crates and equipment. Beyond, a small tent, marked with foreign characters, glowed with lantern light. Inside, they guessed, was an officer. Kenzo signaled with 2 fingers. Ichiro slipped forward, crawling through brush like a badger. A pebble rolled, then stopped. The sentry turned, stepped forward. Too slow. Kenzo was already behind him, cloth wrapping his mouth, tanto flashing once. The body was dragged into the shadows. They entered the tent with the silence of falling ash. The man inside, a Mongol officer, barely had time to reach for his blade. Kenzo pinned him with one arm while the others tied him, blindfolded and gagged. In minutes, they were gone. By dawn, the camp stirred, but the officer was already bound in a cellar beneath Tsukinawa's storehouse. Goro stood before him. He's not just a scout, he said. He wore silk. Carried a scroll case. The scroll contained diagrams of the island, attack routes marked in red. He's a planner, Kenzo said. One who knows when the next wave comes. The prisoner refused to speak for 2 days. Not to threats, not to food, not to pain. Until Ichiro, quiet and thoughtful, brought him rice and a folded crane made from reed paper. This is for the child you took, he whispered. She was my cousin. Something broke in the man's face. That night, he spoke. He told them of a signal fire set to burn within 3 days. Once lit, the larger fleet offshore would launch a full assault. He also whispered of growing unrest, how the commanders feared the islanders' madness. They call you the ghosts of Tsukinawa, the prisoner said. They say you cannot die. Yujiro scoffed. Then let that fear be fed. That evening, Goro summoned the council again. The map was laid on the table. We have 2 days, he said. And now, we have their plan. He pointed to the scroll. The fire tower stands here. He said it will be lit at dawn. Kenzo leaned in. Then we burn it before they can. Yujiro grinned. I volunteer. Goro shook his head. No. We all do. This time, we do not raid. We strike. The sun had not yet risen when Goro's plan took shape in full. The scroll from the captured Mongol officer detailed a signal tower, high on the eastern bluff, that, once lit, would alert the main fleet to strike in force. Destroying it was not only critical, it was the island's last chance. The tower stood on a ridge lined with black pines and sheer cliffs. Guarded by a detachment of 15 Mongol soldiers, it was meant to be easily defensible, visible from the sea, and untouchable by villagers. But Kenzo knew a hidden trail, an old logging path carved by charcoal burners years ago. That night, under cloud cover, they moved. Kenzo led Yujiro, Ichiro, and 7 volunteers, men who had survived every ambush and fire since the siege began. They carried soaked cloths to smother flames, axes to cripple the tower's legs, and tar to ignite the camp below if needed. They reached the base of the ridge just before midnight. The wind shifted in their favor, carrying sea mist inland and silencing their approach. A lone Mongol sentry dozed beside a fire. Yujiro, impatient, crept forward, only to be pulled back by Kenzo. Wait for the owls, Kenzo whispered. And as if summoned, a screech echoed through the forest. The group moved in. The first guard fell without sound. The second barely gasped before Ichiro's blade found his throat. But the third, shifting in sleep, awoke just as Yujiro stepped over him. A shout pierced the stillness. Now! Kenzo roared. The village fighters surged forward. Steel clashed. Arrows flew. Yujiro fought like a storm, hacking through the defenders with raw fury. But it was Ichiro who reached the base of the tower first, throwing the tar and fire pots with expert aim. Flames danced up the wooden scaffolding. Above, a startled Mongol lit a torch, intent on reaching the summit beacon. Kenzo hurled his spear. The man dropped. But the torch rolled forward. Ichiro leapt into the tower. He snatched the torch, crushed it underfoot, and shouted, "It won't burn." Below, Goro's men set fire to the Mongol tents. Chaos broke out. Enemy soldiers scrambled, unsure where to defend. 2 fell trying to scale the ridge. The beacon tower burned, but not with signal fire. Its legs collapsed, its signal drum toppled, and its light never reached the sea. By dawn, the ridge was empty. Ichiro limped home with a bandaged arm and ash in his hair. Kenzo's blade dripped only rainwater. Yujiro bore a shallow cut across his brow but smiled like a boy who had outwitted fate. Goro met them at the edge of the forest. It's done. Yujiro nodded. They won't be signaling anything now. But the relief was short-lived. An hour later, smoke rose from the northern beach. The Mongols, realizing their plan had failed, began preparing their full assault anyway. Without the signal, they were exposed, but enraged. A new war drum beat. A new wave would come. But Goro, holding the officer's scroll, pointed at a line of hills. Then we make them come to us. On our ground. One last battle. The air smelled of pine and char. From the watchtower, Goro watched smoke curl upward from the northern beach. A new force had landed, 3 ships at least. Their silhouettes were sharper, their banners darker. Reinforcements had come. Without the signal tower, the Mongol commanders hesitated, uncertain. But not for long. They'll strike fast, Kenzo said, sharpening his blade. They want to crush us before word reaches the mainland. We'll give them speed, Goro replied. But not victory. He laid out the map taken from the Mongol officer and traced a valley west of the village, a place of thorny brush and narrow ridgelines. We draw them in, then close the jaws. The plan was simple in shape, but deadly in timing. Yujiro and Ichiro led a decoy squad, slipping into the hills to stage a visible retreat. They would draw the enemy into the gully, where the village's hidden fighters waited in trees, behind stones, and beneath the brush. The narrow path allowed only 2 men abreast, perfect for disruption. At dawn, drums pounded from the Mongol camps. An advance party, nearly 100 strong, poured into the forest. Yujiro and his men appeared in brief flashes, hurling stones and arrows, then vanishing into the brush. The Mongols gave chase, shouting, confident. Too confident. The valley closed around them. From above, villagers dropped nets woven with fishhooks and thorns. Arrows rained from above. A boulder, loosened by hidden ropes, tumbled through their flank. Panic spread. Their tight formation broke as warriors slipped, shouted, and turned to find nothing but rising smoke. Kenzo struck then, leading the right wing from the trees, cutting down men as they turned. Yujiro reappeared with a torch in each hand, setting fire to the dry brush behind them. Trapped. Goro, waiting at the far ridge, gave the final signal, a blast from an ox horn, and the hills echoed with war cries. The battle was short, chaotic, and decisive. Of the enemy, fewer than 20 staggered away, leaderless and bleeding. That night, Goro stood with Kenzo by the fire. This was their strongest push yet, the old headman said. Kenzo nodded. If they break again, they'll come back like a flood. Yujiro limped over, a crude bandage on his leg. Let them. I'll dam the sea myself. But even laughter could not mask what they all felt. The victories were adding up, but so were the wounds. Supplies had dwindled. Arrows were reused. Food ran low. The island had bought time. But time, too, was bleeding out. And in the Mongol camp, a new banner had risen, red, edged in black. Kenzo stared at it and frowned. That one did not land today. Goro narrowed his eyes. No. That one was already here. A new enemy had stepped forward. And the final battle drew near. Night fell heavy and without stars. A hush gripped the forest, and the usual sounds of crickets and owls were replaced by silence, a silence that unsettled even the bravest. Atop the watchtower, Ichiro spotted something strange, a cluster of figures at the edge of the Mongol camp standing unnaturally still. Not a patrol, not a formation, watching. Waiting. By dawn, the first arrow came. It was not fired from a bow. It was launched by a crossbow of unfamiliar design, short, heavy, and cruel. The shaft landed at the edge of the village square, embedded in stone. Attached was a scroll. Yujiro unrolled it. It's not a warning, he said. It's a list. Of our names. Kenzo read it aloud. Goro. Kenzo. Yujiro. Ichiro. Nakamura's granddaughter. Even the child they took. Goro looked at the ink. Someone has been watching us from the start. And then they saw him. On a black horse, clad in half-plate armor of Mongol and Chinese origin, rode a tall figure with no crest, no banner, only a red scarf wrapped around his throat. His eyes were pale, his stare unblinking. He rode alone to the field below the tower and stopped. I am Alec, he called. The one who breaks ghosts. Goro stepped forward. Then you've chosen the wrong island. Alec gave no reply, only turned and rode back. That night, traps were sprung without footsteps. Nets were cut. 2 sentries disappeared. When found, their weapons were untouched, their throats cleanly slit. Kenzo whispered to Goro in the dark, "This is not war. It is a hunt." The island defenders dug deeper. Fortified wells, reinforced doors. Even Yujiro began walking without armor, afraid its rattle would betray him. The villagers, though terrified, did not abandon their posts. On the second night, Alex struck. A silent breach at the southern orchard, 5 elite warriors clad in dark leather, moving like ghosts. They reached the granary before anyone noticed. Ichiro, tending coals nearby, spotted them by chance. He cried out and threw a torch. The flame caught one's cloak, revealing him to the archers. Arrows flew. Screams echoed. Kenzo, blade in hand, met the intruders by the granary. The fight was short and brutal. One fell by his strike. Yujiro tackled another into a trench. 2 fled. The last, wounded, was captured. Goro stood over the man. "Who sent you?" The captive only muttered, "Alec watches. Always." By dawn, the red-scarfed commander rode once more to the ridge. He carried no flag. He did not speak. He simply tossed something into the grass. A child's ribbon. Ichiro stepped forward, fists clenched. "That's hers." Goro placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we take her back. And we end this." Kenzo nodded. "We attack. Not to defend. But to break their shadow." Preparations began. The final strike was near. And this time, they would not wait for the storm to come. They would ride into it. The wind blew from the east that night, strong and full of salt. Goro stood beneath the torii gate, silent, holding a single arrow in his hand. It was fletched with crimson hawk feathers, the mark of Alec's elite. "He'll come tonight," Kenzo said. "He'll want to end this before the mainland learns what we've done." Goro nodded. "Then let's end it first." The defenders gathered by firelight. Fewer than 30 now. Wounded, tired, hungry. But unbroken. "We strike their heart," Goro said. "Alec commands from the western hill. His camp is small but sharp. That's where the girl is. That's where he bleeds." Yujiro stepped forward, still limping from the last fight. "I'll take point." Kenzo looked to Ichiro. "You guard our flank. Burn their escape." They moved before midnight. The path to the hill was narrow, marked by fallen pines and loose stone. It climbed like a serpent, hiding traps both natural and man-made. Goro led them through the old boar trail, a route no map held. When they reached the edge of the camp, they saw no fire, no movement. Then the wind shifted. From the trees behind them, whistles cut the air. An ambush. Alec had known. Arrows rained. The defenders dove for cover, returning fire through the brush. Yujiro rose with a roar, cutting through 2 attackers before falling to one knee. Kenzo flanked right, drawing steel like thunder. Goro charged the camp. He found her, the girl, tied inside a wooden pen. A lone guard turned, surprised, and Goro's blade found his throat. He lifted the child into his arms. Outside, the defenders had turned the ambush into chaos. Ichiro lit the brush with fire pots, forcing the enemy into the open. The Mongol line faltered. Then came Alec. He stepped from the trees, twin curved blades drawn. Eyes calm. Gait slow. A hunter with no fear. Kenzo met him head-on. Steel clashed like bells in a storm. Blow for blow, step for step. Kenzo, disciplined. Alec, brutal. Goro reached the ridge with the girl, placing her into Ichiro's arms. "Run," he shouted. But he turned back. He would not leave Kenzo. Yujiro dragged himself up, joined them. The 3 stood together. Alec stepped back, circled, then charged. They met him with fury. Yujiro's strike opened his side. Kenzo followed with a cut across the thigh. Goro landed the final blow, his blade driven into Alex's chest with both hands. The red scarf dropped. The commander fell. By sunrise, the Mongols retreated. Word had reached the sea. The mainland knew. Tsukinawa had stood. And the storm had passed. But one part remained. The reckoning. And the dawn. The morning after the final clash rose quiet, pale with fog. It clung to the ruined fields, coiled around blackened bamboo stalks, and wreathed the shattered huts like smoke from an unseen pyre. But there were no fires. Only stillness. Harada Goro walked the village square in silence. His armor was cracked, the edge of his blade dulled, and his back hunched with weight not of age, but of memory. Kenzo followed a few steps behind, his left arm bound in cloth, his eyes watching everything. From the cliffs above the northern bay, Ichiro stood, squinting into the distance. Where once a fleet of enemy sails blackened the horizon, now only seabirds circled and driftwood floated. The Mongols were gone. But the cost had been steep. Yujiro did not rise that morning. He had smiled with victory the night before, even joked that Alec had bled like any man. But his wound, deep and cruel, had found him before sunrise. Goro had sat with him to the end. He died as he lived, Kenzo said, loud and grinning. They buried him beneath the torii gate. A long silence passed. Then came drums. But not of war. From the eastern shore, boats appeared, not of invaders, but of allies. Men from the mainland, Ashigaru and local lords, arrived too late to fight, but just in time to witness what remained. They carried medicine, rice, scrolls of commendation, and official seals. One among them, a daimyo, feudal lord, of Kyushu, stepped onto the beach and knelt before Goro. We heard of Tsukinawa. We thought it was lost. It almost was, Goro said. But not quite. The days that followed were filled with repair and reckoning. The granaries were rebuilt. The wounded were treated. The girl, taken in the earliest raid, clung to Ichiro like a shadow. She would not speak at first, but each day her eyes grew clearer. Kenzo helped raise a new watchtower, taller than the last. From its peak, one could see far beyond the strait. A warning post for any future threat. But there was no talk of vengeance. Only survival. Word spread quickly across Japan. The tiny island that had not fallen, Tsukinawa, became legend. Samurai wrote poems about it. Peasants passed down stories of Yujiro's last charge, Ichiro's firelit raid, and Goro's defiance beneath the tower. The shogun's messengers arrived weeks later, bearing silver and scrolls declaring every defender a hero. Goro refused most of it. Give the coin to the children, he said. And remember the ones who did not return. Kenzo, when asked for a statement, said only, we held because we had to. Years passed. The island healed. Children were born who never knew the fear of Mongol drums. But the stories remained, carved into wood, written on banners, and told by the fire each winter. Ichiro became a teacher, training youths not just in weapons, but in discipline, patience, and honor. Goro, old and bent, sat at the base of the torii each morning, watching the waves. And every year, on the night the fires first came, the villagers lit lanterns and placed them in the sea. For the fallen. For the watchers. For the island that lived. This tale, based on the resilience of Japan's defenders during the Mongol invasions, reminds us how even the smallest places can hold back storms when the hearts of their people burn brighter than fear. Thank you for watching The Island That Did Not Fall. Please subscribe for more historical legends from Japan's past, and honor the memory of those who stood when all others fled. Until next time, walk with courage.